So it's that time of the year when people have to debate on whether or not they should upgrade to the newest iPhone being released. But this year, it might be a bit more difficult. The iPhone 14 Pro isn't a complete redesign by any means. Its design is similar to that of the 13 Pro, and the 12 Pro before that, and the 11 Pro before that. But that doesn't mean that Apple hasn't made any improvements to this year's iPhone either. Apple has focused on a couple of key features to set the iPhone 14 Pro apart from the previous models. And they are new iPhone 14 exclusive safety features, upgrades to the camera systems, and an updated display. But are these improvements enough to sway you to upgrading your iPhone 13 Pro? This year, Apple has emphasized safety in several of the products that they have unveiled during their Far Out event, starting off with crash detection, which uses the sensors in your iPhone 14 to detect up to 256 Gs and will automatically notify emergency services and contacts if you are in a severe car crash. And if you're wearing an Apple Watch as well, both your iPhone 14 and your Apple Watch will work seamlessly together to efficiently get you help. The other new feature coming to the iPhone 14 Pro is emergency SOS via satellite. If you're outside of cellular and Wi-Fi coverage and an emergency happens, you are now able to request help via satellite. You will need to be outside with a clear view of the sky, and since satellites have limited bandwidth, you will need to point your iPhone 14 towards the satellite. Thankfully, the app shows you where to point your phone to establish a connection with the satellite and stay connected as the satellite moves. Once connected, you'll be asked a couple of questions to determine what emergency service you need, and then the services will be sent out to you. This service comes free with a purchase of an iPhone 14 for 2 years. Then we'll have to see how much either Apple charges for the service or if it gets rolled into one of the Apple One plans. Neither of these features are making their way to the 13 Pros. I don't believe that these features alone should be reason enough for you to upgrade. But if you're already planning on getting an iPhone 14, this is a great peace of mind to have on a device that you're going to have on you most of the time. It's been years since Apple has increased the megapixel count from the main camera of the iPhone. Since 2015, when Apple unveiled the iPhone 6s, the main camera has had a 12 megapixel sensor. This year, Apple has upgraded the cameras on the iPhone 14 Pros and given the main camera 48 megapixels. To put this in perspective, the Sony a7 IV I'm using to record all my YouTube videos has 33 megapixels. So the iPhone 14 Pro Max has 15 megapixels more than my Sony camera and 4 times the amount of the iPhone 13 Pro Max. But does that mean you'll be getting 4 times better pictures? A couple months ago, I took these photos on my then iPhone 13 Pro Max. I was very impressed by the details in the photos taken off of a smartphone. I recently went back to the same spot in town to take similar pictures since the iPhone 14 Pro Max now comes with an upgraded 48 megapixel main camera. Here are 3 similar pictures. One is off the 13 Pro Max, the other 2 are off the 14 Pro Max, but one is a bin down 12 megapixel photo and the other is off the full 48 megapixel sensor. Comment below which picture you think is the full 48 megapixel photo, and I will reveal which is which in a following video. You'll also get an additional 2x zoom, which is accomplished by cropping into the center portion of the full 48 megapixel sensor. Therefore, you aren't losing any quality while still using this focal length. Another feature enabled because of the 48 megapixel sensor is action mode, which crops into the video to keep it as smooth as possible. iPhones are already known for having pretty good video capabilities, and this just adds yet another layer to it. So while there have been plenty of improvements to this year's camera systems, the camera systems in the iPhone 13 Pros were already one of, if not the best camera systems in a smartphone. So if you're not going to be using the added features in the iPhone 14 Pro camera system often, then this is also not a good reason to update either. This year, the feature that I'm most excited for is the dynamic island. It's something new and different from what we've seen before, not just on an iPhone, but for a smartphone altogether. The dynamic island blends hardware and software so well that at times it's hard to tell when hardware ends and software begins. Well, that might be a little dramatic, but I believe that is the first step in the next stage for displays and software alike, making notifications and alerts much more involved and intuitive than it was with just the notch. While the notch on the iPhone 13 Pro Max did get a little bit smaller than previous years, it still just continued to be the housing for some of the phone's hardware and nothing more. Visually, the island is much more appealing to look at as well, and it's one of the only ways you'll be able to tell an iPhone 13 Pro from an iPhone 14 Pro. Another way you could tell the difference is the always on display. On most other phones, they give you a black screen with some info on it, like the date and time. But like always, Apple might be late to the party, but they show up with a couple of tricks. The always on display dims your current wallpaper or photo and allows you to not only see the date and time, but any notification coming in as well. It also maintains the color of the wallpaper and skin tones. While many have complained that the always on display on the iPhone 14 Pros are too bright, I prefer this method and I believe it to be more practical as well. The addition of the dynamic island and the always on display are great. And if you're like me who loves tech and wants the latest and greatest, this might have been enough to entice you to upgrade to the latest iPhone. So iPhone 14 Pro or iPhone 13 Pro, which one of these two would I recommend? It depends on your situation. If you're coming from an iPhone 10 or older, I'd say look into getting a 14 Pro, not only because it's the latest iPhone, but it will also give you the most dramatic change overall. If you have an iPhone 11 Pro or newer, I'd say to stick it out another year. You're already getting 60-70% of the same experience that you would be getting on a 14 Pro. Unless you're going to be taking advantage of the additional features on the iPhone 14 Pro, 70% of the same experience is still great. Don't get me wrong, the iPhone 14 Pro is a great phone with great features, and that's why I picked mine up at launch. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for my full review of the iPhone 14 Pro Max. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell to stay notified. Other than that, I'll see you guys in the next one.